The mop squeaked as it glided across the glossy tiles of room 509. Zara, barely 24, scrubbed with practiced rhythm, her gloved hands moving swiftly. Her uniform was faded, her apron stained from too many rooms and too many shifts. But today, she wore a secret smile. With a battered smartphone cradled between her shoulder and ear, she was deep in conversation. Not in English. Not in her native tongue. But in crisp, fluent Mandarin Chinese, her voice bouncing with laughter as she discussed someone's contract back home. Her accent was nearly perfect. Anyone listening would have assumed she was a trained translator or diplomat. But no, just a cleaner, working 6 days a week in one of the most expensive hotels in New York City. The sunlight streaming through the large window caught the tired lines under her eyes, but they didn't dim her energy. This was her escape, the phone calls, the language, the little world she built between cleaning bed sheets and emptying trash cans. Behind her, the door clicked open with a soft push. Zara didn't hear it, she was too immersed in her Mandarin phone call. But standing just a few feet away was a tall, white-haired man in his early 60s, wearing a navy cashmere coat and leather shoes that cost more than her monthly salary. His name was Mr. Calvin Reeves, a billionaire hotel magnate who rarely stayed in his own properties. But this week, he had come for a secret board meeting, and forgot his watch in room 509. What he found instead made him freeze in the doorway. His cleaner, poorly dressed, obviously working class, was speaking one of the hardest languages on earth with ease. And not just that. As she switched mid-sentence into Arabic, the surprise on his face deepened. Zara turned around suddenly, her eyes widening as she realized she wasn't alone. The phone slipped from her shoulder. Mr. Reeves blinked. He had so many questions. Zara froze in place, her heart pounding in her ears. She had been caught. Not stealing. Not slacking off. Just speaking. But judging from the way the man was staring at her, you'd think he had just uncovered a hidden spy. She rushed to switch off the call and dropped her mop instinctively, stepping back from the billionaire whose photo she'd once seen on a hotel newsletter. Mr. Calvin Reeves. The man who owned the entire chain she worked for. Her lips parted, but words failed her. She wasn't sure if she should apologize, run, or pretend nothing happened. Calvin, however, remained still, his eyes scanning her face like he was trying to place her in a different category altogether. Finally, he broke the silence. Was that Mandarin? An Arabic? Zara nodded slowly, still unsure if this was some kind of setup. Yes, sir. Calvin's brows furrowed. He took a slow step inside. Where did you learn that? Zara gripped her apron, suddenly self-conscious of how dirty it looked. Books. Online. YouTube. I just love languages. It sounded ridiculous the moment she said it. But it was the truth. Calvin was silent again, now walking slowly around the room as if inspecting it, not for cleanliness, but for a reason to believe what he had just heard. Zara swallowed hard, her hands tightening behind her back. She expected him to laugh. Or accuse her of lying. Or worse, fire her for being on the phone while on duty. But instead, he walked to the desk, sat down, and gestured toward the seat across from him. Sit. Please. Zara hesitated. No guest, let alone a billionaire, had ever offered her a seat. She took it cautiously, gripping the edge. Calvin leaned forward. So you're telling me, you taught yourself 2 of the hardest languages in the world, while working as a cleaner? Zara nodded. 3 actually. I can also read and write in Russian. But I'm not very fluent yet. Calvin blinked again, then chuckled in disbelief. This wasn't a hotel cleaner. Not in the way he understood it. There was a story here. A very real one. And for the first time in years, Calvin Reeves found himself more interested in someone's mind than their resume. Zara still didn't believe this was real. Billionaires didn't sit and chat with hotel cleaners. They didn't ask them to sit down or listen as if their words mattered. And yet here she was, her apron smeared with bleach stains, sitting across from Calvin Reeves, the man whose name was printed on every employee ID in the building. He leaned back in the chair now, arms folded, watching her like a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You said you studied online. How long have you been doing this?" Zara shrugged, her voice soft. "Since I was 13. We couldn't afford school after my dad passed. I started learning with borrowed phones, public computers, anything I could find." Calvin raised a brow. "No formal education?" Zara shook her head. "Just hard work and YouTube." The quiet confidence in her tone was striking. She wasn't bragging. She wasn't trying to impress. She was just stating facts. That made her even more fascinating to Calvin, who had spent years surrounded by polished Ivy League graduates who couldn't think for themselves. For a moment, Calvin said nothing. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek leather notepad. He flipped it open and clicked a pen. Zara's eyes followed the motion nervously. "Tell me something," he said, "what do you plan to do with all these languages?" Zara looked down at her lap, her fingers still trembling. "I wanted to work as a translator, or maybe a cultural consultant. But there's no chance without papers or a degree." Calvin scribbled something in his pad. "And if someone gave you a chance?" She looked up, startled. "I'd give everything I have. I already am." That answer lingered in the air between them. Calvin nodded slowly, then stood up and buttoned his coat. "Be at the staff lounge at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Sharp." Zara blinked. "Am I in trouble?" He smiled. "No. You might be in the middle of something life-changing." And with that, he walked out, leaving her frozen in the chair, heart racing, head spinning, mop still leaning against the wall, forgotten. Zara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the conversation with Mr. Reeves. Was she dreaming? Was it some sort of prank? Billionaires didn't offer chances to nobodies. Yet something about the way he looked at her, the sincerity in his voice, made her believe it was real. She showed up at the hotel staff lounge the next morning, not in her usual cleaning gear, but in her one and only decent outfit, a navy blouse and dark jeans that she had ironed twice. Her shoes still squeaked from wear, but at least they were clean. She sat by the vending machine, gripping a small notebook in her hands, afraid to breathe too loudly. The lounge buzzed with chatter, but no one paid her any attention. Not until a hotel manager walked in and looked directly at her. "Zara, come with me," the woman said. Zara stood quickly, heart hammering. She followed her through a side hallway she'd never walked down before. It didn't lead to guest rooms or laundry. It led to a private boardroom. There, at the head of a sleek glass table, was Calvin Reeves, sipping black coffee and reviewing a document. He looked up as she entered, and his expression softened. "Right on time." "Good." Zara stepped in cautiously. "Sir, am I here for a job?" He smiled. "Not yet. You're here for a test." Her stomach flipped. "A test?" He nodded. "Let's see if you're really as good as you sounded yesterday. I've invited someone to help us find out." Just then, the door opened again, and a woman in a crisp suit walked in. She greeted Calvin in rapid Mandarin. Zara stood up straight and responded fluently, causing the woman's eyebrows to rise. A moment later, Calvin gave a subtle nod. He was already impressed, but he wanted more. Zara could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders, but she didn't let it show. As soon as the woman began speaking in Mandarin, Zara slipped into the rhythm of the conversation with confidence. They discussed cultural customs, business etiquette, and even translated a few news headlines Calvin handed them on printed pages. The woman, who introduced herself as Ms. Lin, was visibly impressed. At one point, she even turned to Calvin and said in English, "She speaks better than some of our in-house translators." Zara's cheeks flushed, but she kept her posture upright, her voice steady. She had waited years for a moment like this, years spent cleaning floors while feeding her mind. Calvin remained quiet for most of the exchange, observing Zara with the careful eye of a man who had built empires. When they transitioned to Arabic, the switch was seamless. Zara carried herself with a grace and ease that no one would expect from someone earning minimum wage. After nearly an hour, Ms. Lin stood and nodded. "She's exceptional," she said plainly. Calvin nodded back, satisfied. As Zara stood too, unsure what came next, he finally spoke. "You're done cleaning rooms," he said. Her breath caught in her throat. "Starting Monday, you'll be training with our international relations team. I'll be watching your progress personally." For a moment, Zara didn't know how to react. Was this really happening? Her knees felt weak, but she smiled. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "No," Calvin said, standing too. "Thank you, for reminding me that brilliance can come from anywhere. Word travels fast in hotels." By noon the next day, staff in every department, from kitchen porters to front desk receptionists, had heard the rumor: Zara the cleaner had been promoted. Some said she had connections. Others claimed she'd saved a guest's life. A few whispered about her speaking strange foreign tongues to some executive. None of them got it quite right. But Zara could feel the shift. Where once people barely noticed her, now eyes lingered. Some congratulated her half-heartedly. Others didn't hide their envy. She walked through the staff hallway like someone balancing on a tightrope, grateful for her new opportunity, but painfully aware of how alone she felt in it. That afternoon, she was given access to a temporary desk in a quiet corner of the hotel's administrative floor. It wasn't grand, just a plain table with a laptop and a city view, but to Zara, it felt like a palace. She stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened an orientation file labeled International Client Services, Phase 1. She read through the manual twice, making notes in her dog-eared notebook, her mind hungry to absorb every word. Yet even as she focused, she could hear the faint sound of two male staff members passing by the corridor, one of them muttering, "Let's see how long she lasts up here." Her jaw tightened. She refused to let their doubts sink in. This was her shot. She had waited her entire life for someone to see her, and now that someone had. She wouldn't waste it, not for anyone. Zara's training began sooner than she expected. On her second day in the International Relations Wing, Calvin's assistant handed her a file. Inside were profiles of 3 clients from different countries, each set to arrive for a luxury partnership meeting the following week. Her job? Study their backgrounds, understand their cultural preferences, and prepare an orientation briefing in both Mandarin and Arabic. No one explained the stakes, but Zara could tell by the careful way the documents were bound and the confidentiality stamp on each page that this wasn't a casual exercise. She set to work with fierce determination, translating late into the night and fact-checking every word 3 times before sending her drafts to the senior manager. The next morning, the senior manager, a tall woman named Dana, dropped the file on Zara's desk without a word. Zara opened it and found the corrections section completely blank. Just one comment sat at the bottom of the page in red ink: "Perfect. Present this to Mr. Reeves yourself." Zara's hands trembled. Present it? To him? She had assumed someone else would pass it on. Now, with her notes clutched tightly to her chest, she made her way to the executive floor. Calvin's office was a minimalist fortress of glass and wood. She knocked. His assistant smiled and waved her in. Inside, Calvin was reviewing a digital presentation, but when he saw her, he leaned back and gave her his full attention. "You've impressed Dana," he said, tapping the file. "Let's see if you can impress our clients next." Zara stood at the front of the private briefing room, her notes laid out neatly in front of her, heart pounding beneath her neatly ironed blouse. The room was sleek and cold, lined with tall-back chairs and soft lighting. In the center sat Calvin Reeves, flanked by 2 board members and a visiting guest from their Middle East division. Zara took a steady breath and began presenting in Arabic. Her voice was clear, unwavering. Every sentence rolled off her tongue with precision, and though her palms were damp, she didn't falter once. Halfway through, she switched to Mandarin without hesitation, causing one of the older board members to raise his eyebrows in surprise. She noticed, but didn't pause. She had practiced for this moment, and no whisper of doubt was going to shake her. When she finished, there was a brief silence. Then Calvin leaned forward and gave a single nod. "Flawless," he said. The man beside him, clearly from the Arabic-speaking region, chuckled lightly. "Where did you find her?" he asked, turning to Calvin. "In a classroom?" Calvin smiled. "No," he said quietly, "in a housekeeping uniform." That stunned the room into silence again, but Zara didn't smile. She kept her eyes down, professional. After the meeting, as she gathered her notes, Dana walked past her with an unreadable expression. "Impressive," she said, but her tone didn't match her words. Zara couldn't tell if she meant it or not. As she exited, a few of the junior associates whispered nearby, pretending not to look. She had become a symbol either of hope or resentment, and she could feel the pressure building. But what mattered most was that Calvin had said one word, flawless. That was all she needed to keep going. That night, Zara sat alone in her small studio apartment, the glow from the city lights flickering through the cracked blinds. Her modest space was barely big enough for a bed, a hot plate, and a small desk, but she didn't care. It was hers. She stared at the mirror for a long time, still wearing the blouse she had worn during her presentation. Slowly, she pulled her notebook closer and flipped to the first page, where she had scribbled her dreams in the margins years ago. Interpreter. Consultant. Teacher. She touched each word, remembering the girl who used to study in the back of a noisy marketplace, dodging glances from people who said she was wasting her time. She had come a long way, but she knew better than to think she had arrived. As she cleaned her desk, her phone buzzed with a number she hadn't seen in over 3 years. Her hand hovered over the screen before she finally answered. "Zara," the voice said, low, familiar, and cold. Her stomach turned. It was Maurice, her older brother. "I heard you work for that rich hotel guy now," he said, not even trying to hide his disdain. Zara's voice was guarded. "How did you get this number?" Maurice chuckled. "Connections. Don't worry. I'm not calling to say congrats. I'm calling because people back home haven't forgotten what you did." Zara stiffened. The memory came back like a flood, why she had left her home country, why she had changed her name on her resume. It wasn't a crime, but it was something her family never forgave. "I have nothing to say to you," she replied. He didn't argue. Just before hanging up, he said, "You may think you've escaped, Zara. But the past has a long memory." The call ended. And for the first time since her promotion, Zara felt cold fear crawl back into her chest. The following morning, Zara arrived at the office earlier than usual. Her mind was still clouded by her brother's call, but she forced herself to stay focused. Calvin Reeves had requested a follow-up meeting, and she wouldn't allow old wounds to ruin her progress. She sat quietly at the same glass table, sipping water and reviewing documents, when the door opened. Calvin walked in without his usual entourage, holding a single folder in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. He looked more casual than usual. No suit jacket, just a gray sweater and slacks, but his eyes were sharp. "Zara," he said with a calm tone, "how are you adjusting?" She forced a polite smile. "It's been a learning curve, sir. But I'm grateful." Calvin took a seat across from her and set the folder down between them. Dana told me you stayed up late rewriting yesterday's file. You didn't have to. Zara lowered her gaze. I didn't want to submit anything that felt rushed. He nodded thoughtfully, then leaned back. Zara, I hope you don't mind me asking, how did someone like you end up here? The question caught her off guard. Someone like me, she repeated carefully. He gave a small chuckle. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, someone brilliant, clearly driven, but working as a cleaner. There must be a story. Zara hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him everything. The hardship. The shame. The truth behind the name she no longer used. But another part of her remembered her brother's voice, the threats, the warnings. Let's just say life rerouted me, she finally answered. Calvin watched her for a moment longer, then nodded. Fair enough. But if you ever want to talk, I listen better than I look. That made her smile. Briefly. But even then, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was creeping closer than she'd like. Later that week, Zara was asked to assist in organizing a welcome packet for a VIP client arriving from Shanghai. It was a minor task, but one that involved accessing the internal mailroom, a space most regular staff rarely entered. As she walked through the narrow corridor lined with polished lockers and delivery shelves, she noticed a brown envelope sitting slightly apart from the others. It had no hotel label, no return address, but her name, Zara Cumulo, was written in block letters across the front. She hesitated before picking it up. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a photo clipped to the corner. The picture was old, of her standing outside a community center in her home country, smiling beside a younger boy. Her little cousin, Daniel. The message was scrawled in messy ink. You left us behind. We haven't forgotten. Zara's heart dropped. Her breath caught in her chest. Someone from her past was here, or watching her closely enough to leave something in the secure mailroom. Her first instinct was to report it. But to whom? If she went to HR, they'd ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. If she told Calvin, he might think she was hiding something, and in a way, she was. She folded the letter and slipped it deep into her coat pocket. No one saw her leave. But as she walked back to her desk, her shoulders were tense, her eyes scanning every hallway. Whoever had left that message wasn't done. And if she didn't find out who it was, her new life could unravel before it truly began. Zara sat at her desk staring blankly at the screen. The spreadsheets and client briefings in front of her blurred into meaningless patterns. Her mind was stuck on the photo, the message, the quiet threat. Every detail of her carefully built new life now felt like it sat on a foundation of cracking glass. She had worked so hard to distance herself from the mess she left behind. But whoever had left that envelope had found a way into the most secure floor of the hotel. T meant it wasn't just someone from her past, it was someone who knew how to blend in. She considered going to Calvin. He had been kind. Curious, yes, but not intrusive. Still, she hesitated. What would she say? A ghost from my past is following me, but I can't tell you who, why, or how they got in. No. That would only raise suspicion. Instead, she opened her browser and began searching names she hadn't typed in years, old neighbors, family members, even Maurice. Nothing came up. No social media. No recent activity. Just silence. Her stomach churned. As the workday ended, she slipped out quietly, avoiding the usual exits. She took a different subway line home, checking every reflection in every window. For the first time in weeks, Zara didn't feel like a rising star. She felt like prey. And no matter how hard she tried to focus on tomorrow's assignments, one truth wouldn't leave her alone: someone out there wanted to remind her who she used to be, and they didn't plan to stop anytime soon. The next morning, Zara walked into work with a composed expression, but her insides were still in knots. She had barely slept, double-locked her apartment door, and even considered calling out sick. But if her stalker's goal was to rattle her, she refused to give them that satisfaction. She poured herself into work, responding to emails faster than usual, checking and rechecking her translations. Just after lunch, Calvin's assistant appeared at her desk. "Mr. Reeves would like to see you in his office," she said casually. Zara nodded, trying not to show the fear rising in her throat. Was something wrong? Had he found out about the envelope? When she stepped into Calvin's office, he was standing by the window, watching the city below. "Zara," he said, turning with a calm smile. "How do you feel about fancy dinners?" She blinked. "Sir." He chuckled. "There's a client appreciation event this Friday. Very formal. You've been doing excellent work, and I'd like you to attend. Strictly as part of the team, of course." Zara felt a strange blend of pride and fear. "I've never been to one before," she admitted. "Good," he replied. "Then it'll be your first. You'll do fine." She nodded slowly. "Thank you, truly." As she left the office, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a blocked number. No name. Just one line. "We know what you'll be wearing." Her fingers tightened around the phone. That was no coincidence. Someone wasn't just watching, someone was mocking her. Zara stood still in the hallway, caught between two worlds. One filled with opportunity. The other with shadows from her past. And both were now colliding faster than she could stop them. Zara didn't own anything remotely close to what people wore at formal events. Her wardrobe was built for work and survival, not glamour. But she wasn't going to let that stop her. After work, she visited a second-hand boutique tucked between a laundromat and a corner grocery. There, she found a long black dress with a slight shimmer, a little frayed at the edges, but elegant enough to pass. As she paid, she kept glancing over her shoulder, scanning every face. Every cough, every whisper, felt like it was meant for her. She reminded herself to breathe. She'd been through worse. She could handle this too. Back home, she hung the dress on her closet door and sat on the edge of her bed. The apartment was quiet, save for the humming of a broken fan in the window. Her phone buzzed again. Another blocked message. This one read. "You clean up nice. But you can't clean your past." She dropped the phone on the bed. Enough. She opened her email and began typing a message to Calvin, fingers trembling but fast. She wasn't going to include every detail, but he deserved to know something. That she had received threats. That someone from her past might be trying to sabotage her progress. But just as she was about to click send, she hesitated. If this got out, people would look at her differently. Trust might turn into suspicion. And she couldn't afford to lose her second chance. Slowly, painfully, she deleted the draft. If she was going to survive this, she had to be smart. Careful. And above all, brave. The hotel's grand ballroom was nothing like the breakroom floors Zara used to mop. Crystal chandeliers sparkled from above, casting soft gold light over satin-covered tables and polished silverware. The room buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations in at least 5 different languages. Zara stood by the entrance, her second-hand dress hugging her modestly, her hair pulled into a neat bun. She looked elegant, though she felt anything but. She tried not to fidget as executives, investors, and international guests flowed past her, nodding politely. It was overwhelming. But it was also her moment to belong. Calvin appeared beside her just as a waiter passed with a tray of champagne. He took one and offered another to her. "You clean up very well," he said with a small smile. Zara smiled faintly, ignoring the phrase that mirrored the text she'd received earlier. "Thank you," she said quietly. Calvin's gaze lingered on her a moment longer than usual. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You seem guarded." Zara opened her mouth, then shut it. She wanted to tell him everything, but this wasn't the place. Just nerves, she replied. Calvin nodded, then turned as a group of guests approached. She followed him into the crowd, responding in Mandarin when introduced to a Chinese diplomat and later switching to Arabic for a pair of Middle Eastern investors. With each new conversation, Zara felt herself easing into the role, holding her own, smiling naturally, laughing at the right moments. But in the shadows, someone was watching. Someone who knew too much. And as she turned to take a sip of water, she caught a glimpse of a face in the far corner. Familiar. Faintly smirking. Gone before she could place it. Her heart raced again. She wasn't imagining this. Someone from her past was truly here. Zara stood frozen for a second too long. The elegant music faded into a low hum as she scanned the crowd for that smirking face. Her heart pounded louder than the soft jazz playing in the background. It had been years, but she could swear it was him, Tariq, Morris's friend, the one who always lingered too long around her, who knew things he shouldn't. She hadn't seen him since the week she fled her home country. And now he was here, wearing a waiter's uniform. Blending in. Watching. Her throat tightened. She placed her glass down carefully and moved toward the back of the ballroom, pretending to take a phone call. She pushed open the staff door and stepped into the corridor, her breathing shallow. She didn't want to panic, but the realization hit her like a wave, this wasn't just a warning anymore. Whoever was behind the messages had sent someone in. Someone real. Someone close. Zara pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over Calvin's number. She could no longer ignore this. But just as she started to dial, the staff door creaked open behind her. She turned quickly. It wasn't Tariq, it was Calvin himself. He looked concerned. Zara, are you okay? You rushed out of there. She hesitated, torn between telling the truth and pretending again. But the fear in her chest had risen too high to push down anymore. She met his eyes. Mr. Reeves, someone from my past is here. Watching me. And I think they've been threatening me for days. Calvin's expression changed in an instant, from curiosity to full concern. Tell me everything, he said calmly, guiding her further down the hallway. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in this battle. But she also knew, now that she'd spoken up, things would never be the same. Zara sat in a quiet corner of the hotel's executive wing, away from the noise and glamour of the ballroom. Calvin had insisted she take a seat while he made a call to security. Her fingers trembled in her lap as she recounted the timeline, when the messages started, what was in the envelope, the photo, the face she saw in the crowd. She explained who Tariq was, how he had been connected to her brother, and how things turned dangerous after she fled home. Calvin listened closely, nodding with a seriousness that comforted her. When she finished, he let out a slow breath. Why didn't you tell me earlier? He asked gently. I was scared, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought it would ruin everything I've worked for. Calvin stood and placed his hand lightly on the back of the chair. Zara, your safety comes first. And if someone from your past is using this hotel to get to you, we need to handle it, fast and carefully. He pulled out his phone again, this time calling the hotel's chief of security. Within minutes, a sharp-eyed woman named Yvette arrived, carrying a slim folder. Calvin gave her a short version of the story and handed her the name Zara had mentioned. Yvette didn't waste time, she pulled up footage from the ballroom, rewinding and pausing as needed. And there he was, Tariq, dressed in catering attire, walking near the wine station, lingering too long near Zara. Calvin's eyes narrowed. He's not one of our staff. That uniform isn't from our vendor. Zara felt a chill down her spine. So he got in with a fake badge. Calvin nodded. Or someone helped him. That idea opened a whole new door of fear. But for the first time, Zara had people on her side, real power backing her. And she was done hiding. By morning, Calvin had personally launched a quiet internal investigation. No announcements. No alarms. Just quiet scrutiny, layered background checks, and silent cooperation with hotel security. Yvette had begun reviewing every staff entry over the last 3 weeks, cross-checking facial recognition from ballroom footage. Meanwhile, Zara was instructed to stay in public areas with visible security and avoid walking alone. She didn't argue. Part of her was still shaken, but another part had come alive, the part that had survived everything once before and refused to go back into hiding. She was tired of being hunted. That afternoon, Calvin called Zara into a private office near the executive lounge. He stood beside a large screen where still images from the surveillance footage were paused. Yvette found something, he said. 2 staff members helped him get in. One gave him a fake badge. The other smuggled in his catering uniform. Zara's eyes widened. So they're inside? Calvin nodded grimly. And we plan to catch them. But we need your help. He explained the plan, a staged event, another diplomatic dinner, 2 days from now. The idea was to leak word that Zara would be attending, make it sound casual, vulnerable, the same setup as before. If someone was still watching her, or targeting her, they would act again. But this time, hotel security would be watching every step. It's a risk, Calvin admitted. But it's also our best shot at ending this. Zara didn't hesitate. I'll do it. For the first time, she wasn't running. She was facing it head-on. And if they thought she'd be easy to scare again, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The 2 days leading up to the staged dinner felt like walking through fog. Zara moved with purpose, but her nerves ran deep beneath the surface. Calvin stayed close, checking in with her regularly, reviewing details, rehearsing the evening like a chess match. Yvette and her team had planted plainclothes security officers throughout the hotel. Cameras were placed in less obvious spots. Key entrances were monitored, and the catering uniforms were locked down. No one was getting in without clearance. But even with all the safety measures in place, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something unpredictable might still happen. On the evening of the event, she wore the same black dress, now neatly pressed and paired with simple silver earrings Calvin's assistant had gifted her, for confidence, she'd said. The ballroom was smaller this time, more intimate. Just a few select guests. Zara's role was to translate casually between the Mandarin and Arabic speakers, blending in as part of the staff. But she also had one hidden job: keep an eye out for any unfamiliar face or movement. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the room, every instinct on high alert. Calvin gave her a small nod from across the room. She nodded back. The trap had been set. And somewhere nearby, she could feel it, eyes watching. Shadows waiting to move. But this time, she wasn't alone. And this time, she was ready. The first hour of the dinner unfolded without incident. Guests mingled, laughter floated through the air, and Zara did her part, translating quietly, navigating between languages with ease. But she could feel it, something was off. A waiter brushed past her, a little too close. His movements were sharp, eyes slightly lowered, avoiding contact. She glanced at his name tag, Kevin. Her mind flashed. There had been no Kevin on the staff list Calvin had shown her earlier. Her breath caught. Could this be it? She excused herself politely and walked to the refreshment station. Behind her, the waiter moved toward the side exit, glancing over his shoulder. Zara made her move, subtle but fast. She turned to a man standing by the flower arrangement and whispered one word, "Now." The man nodded. He wasn't a guest. He was part of Yvette's undercover team. Within seconds, 2 more guards in waitstaff attire emerged from opposite ends of the room. The man posing as Kevin realized too late. As he turned to escape, the door behind him opened. And there stood Yvette herself, badge out, eyes narrowed. Going somewhere, she said coolly. A quiet scuffle followed. No one screamed. No panic. The guests remained blissfully unaware. Within 5 minutes, Kevin, and the 2 insiders who helped him were in custody. Calvin approached Zara as the dust settled, pride evident in his gaze. "You did it," he said softly. She shook her head. "We did." But deep inside, the victory was hers. She had faced the shadows, and won. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was becoming something more, unbreakable. Later that evening, long after the guests had gone and the ballroom had emptied, Zara found herself once again in Calvin's office. This time, there was no fear, just silence filled with reflection. Calvin poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to her. "You handled that better than some of my top executives would have," he said. Zara gave a faint smile. "I wasn't sure I could. I've never felt so exposed in my life." Calvin sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "You said something the first time we met. That you were just cleaning to survive. But Zara, you're not surviving anymore. You're leading." She didn't reply right away. Her eyes drifted toward the window overlooking the city skyline. "I used to think speaking all those languages would be my escape. That if I just became useful enough, smart enough, maybe someone would open a door for me. But when I finally got the chance, I realized something else. I had to be the one to step through it. No one could carry me." Calvin nodded slowly. "You didn't just step through, you broke the door down." They both laughed softly. The room fell quiet again, but it was a comfortable silence. After a while, Calvin added, "Have you ever considered working overseas? Representing the hotel in our international branches?" Zara turned to him, stunned. "Me? Why not?" he replied. "You already speak their languages. Now it's time to learn to lead in their rooms." Zara didn't know what her future held. But for the first time, she was ready to shape it with her own hands. The next morning, Zara awoke to a message from Calvin's office, "Meeting at 10 a.m., conference room 3B. She arrived early, dressed smartly, her notes in hand though she had no idea what the meeting was about. When she entered the room, she found Calvin seated at the table with 2 other executives and a woman in a charcoal suit, someone Zara hadn't seen before. Calvin stood up as she entered. "Zara, meet Miriam Chase. She's our global programs director based in Geneva." The woman extended her hand. "We've heard a lot about you. And after your performance during the recent incident, we believe it's time to talk about expanding your role." Zara sat down slowly, stunned. Miriam continued, "There's a 2-month cultural immersion and leadership program starting next month in Switzerland. We'd like you to be one of the 6 participants representing our global properties." Zara could hardly believe it. Her heart pounded. I don't even have a passport yet," she said. Calvin smiled. "That's already being arranged." But before she could celebrate, Miriam added quietly, "I won't lie to you. This opportunity comes with pressure. You'll be watched, not just admired. And if anything from your past surfaces that hasn't been disclosed, it could complicate things." Zara nodded, the reality sinking in. "I understand." She wasn't just being offered a promotion. She was being offered a transformation. But it came with a condition: full honesty, full transparency. Could she reveal the whole truth about her past? Was she ready to shed every shadow? She didn't know yet. But she was ready to find out. That evening, Zara sat at her small kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and her laptop open. She had avoided this moment for years, documenting the truth of her past. But if she was going to step into this new life with dignity, she had to own every part of it. She began typing, the truth about the fallout with her family, how she had left after refusing to be part of a corrupt deal orchestrated by Maurice and his friends, and how her safety had been threatened when she chose integrity over loyalty. She explained how she had changed her name for protection, not deception. No dramatics, no excuses, just clarity. The letter wasn't long, but it carried the weight of her silence. When she finished, she saved it and sent it to Calvin directly. A few hours later, she received a short reply. "Thank you for your honesty. It changes nothing, except that I respect you more." Tears welled up in her eyes. For the first time, her story wasn't a secret weapon someone could use against her. It was hers now, spoken, shared, freed. She folded the original sheet of paper, the one she had first written her dreams on, and placed it in her travel pouch. This time, her dream wasn't about escape. It was about elevation. Tomorrow, she would go for her passport appointment. In a few weeks, she would board a flight to Switzerland. And for the first time in her life, Zara wasn't hiding from anything. She was walking forward, eyes wide, head high, heart open. Zara stood at the airport terminal with a small suitcase by her side, her passport freshly stamped, her travel documents tucked neatly into a folder Calvin's assistant had prepared. She glanced around the terminal, amazed at how her life had changed in a matter of weeks. From a cleaner in borrowed shoes to a global delegate representing a billion-dollar hotel empire. It was surreal. Calvin had insisted on a quiet departure, no fanfare, no attention. Just the quiet dignity she deserved. Still, as she waited for her gate to open, she received a message from an unknown number. "You're brave. And I was wrong. Good luck." No name. But she knew who it was. Maurice. Maybe he wasn't coming around, but at least he had stopped chasing her with hate. That was enough. Just before boarding, Calvin called. She answered with a smile. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "More excited than anything," she replied. "You'll do well, Zara. And when you return, we'll have something even bigger waiting for you." She laughed. "You say that like you already have a plan." "I always have a plan," he replied warmly. They exchanged their final words, and she promised to keep in touch. As she boarded, she looked back one last time, not just at the airport, but at everything she had once been. The fear, the past, the silence, it was all behind her now. Ahead was a sky full of promise and a future she had built not through luck, but through strength. She wasn't just leaving for training. She was leaving to become the kind of woman the world couldn't overlook ever again. 3 months later, Zara walked through the grand lobby of the Geneva Hotel headquarters wearing a sleek black suit and a gold pin that marked her as part of the Global Programs Council. Her gait was steady, her eyes focused, her badge now opening doors that once would have been closed in her face. She had completed the leadership program at the top of her class. Fluent in Mandarin and Arabic, now conversational in French, and trained in conflict resolution, Zara wasn't just back, she was elevated. Her story had spread through the internal ranks, not as gossip, but as inspiration. The cleaner who had once scrubbed floors was now advising executives on multicultural relations. On her first day back in New York, Calvin arranged a quiet luncheon with the senior staff. When Zara entered the room, everyone stood. It wasn't forced, it was respect. She took her seat beside Calvin, who simply leaned over and whispered, "I told you, brilliance rises." After the meal, he handed her a new badge with her name printed in bold beneath a new title, Director of International Relations and Cultural Engagement. Zara stood there holding it, overwhelmed. She'd spent years trying to erase herself to fit in. Now, she was being seen for exactly who she was. As the room applauded, she glanced toward the window. Outside, the city buzzed as it always had. But something had changed. This time, she wasn't just in it, she was shaping it. Zara had gone from a voice on a phone, mopping floors in silence, to a voice the world leaned in to hear. And she would never be invisible again. If you were inspired by Zara's journey from cleaner to global director, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful stories like this, only on Faded Heart Stories. See you in the next one.